It's one of our greatest fears. Being on a plane when something goes badly wrong. This series reveals what it's like to live through catastrophic events on board an aircraft.
I just had visions of being burnt alive on this plane.
Using footage that captured these terrifying moments. And hearing from those who survived them.
Everyone looked tense in their seats. It felt like this could be their final moments of their lives.
I looked out to see some of the engine flying off.
At that point, I planned to meet my maker.
These are the world's worst flights.
All right, we're gonna land field right here.
Every year, over 3 billion people travel by plane. Before boarding, they go through extensive security checks. These are designed to deter any passenger intent on committing terror. But no security system is perfect. And when a system fails, passengers' lives are put in danger. Coming up in this program, a threat to blow up a packed plane mid-flight.
His finger is hovering over an explosive. He said, "I'm gonna do it."
A hijacker takes a group of passengers hostage.
The first thing that came to my head was, there's a terrorist here and he's just gonna bomb this plane.
And passengers fight the pilot for control of a plane.
I felt the situation could turn really, really bad, really, really quick.
31st of May 2017, late night in Australia's second largest city. Ex-Aussie Rules footballer Andrew Leoncelli had spent the evening celebrating a friend's testimonial.
I did have a dinner with one of my former teammates who was being inducted into the Hall of Fame for the Melbourne Football Club. Some great speeches, some great footage. So it was a really fun evening, and I was really upset actually to have to leave.
Just before 10 p.m, Andrew left the party early. He had a late-night flight to catch from Melbourne's International Airport.
It was a very busy flight, and I was seated in seat 4A, which is the front section of the plane on the left-hand side window.
Andrew was travelling to Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur, for a weekend of business meetings. There were 336 other passengers on board.
I was fairly tired because it was late at night, so I was pretty keen to get a glass of wine and then go to sleep.
At 11:11 p.m, Andrew's plane took off and headed south over Melbourne. With the plane still climbing, everyone should have been strapped into their seats.
About 10 minutes into the flight, I heard a commotion between the air hostess and a man that I couldn't see, and everyone else had their headphones on and was oblivious to what was happening. And I started to really concentrate on the conversation, and he was saying, "I need to get into the cabin to see the captain now." So I undid my seatbelt and rushed to her aid. My heart was pumping, and as I approached, I come across a man dressed all in black with a dark skin, beard, a beanie pulled down over his eyes and holding a big black object. But my instant reaction was to say, "Get back to your seat." To which he said, "I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to blow the plane up." Obviously your heart sinks, and when he's making a threat and he's highly agitated, his finger is hovering like a millimetre over a makeshift explosive. And you're thinking that this could be it. And he was physically shaking. He said, "I'm going to do it." So that's when I stepped back.
Faced with an aggressive hijacker, Andrew turned round to ask other passengers for help. But in that split second, the hijacker made his move.
He started running down the aisle, and the hostess gave chase, screaming out, "Help me, tackle the man, tackle the man." I remember looking back and just thinking, whatever's going to happen is totally out of my hands.
Just before midnight on the 31st of May 2017, Malaysian Airlines flight MH128 had taken off from Melbourne's International Airport. Its journey to Kuala Lumpur was scheduled to take just over 7 hours. But just after takeoff, passenger Andrew Leoncelli found himself face to face with a man threatening to blow up the plane.
Everything goes through your mind and you instantly think that you're so helpless. I mean, that's what I really felt, utter hopelessness and fear that that was the last thing that we were ever going to do.
Before Andrew could do anything, the man ran towards the rear of the plane.
And somebody stuck their foot out, tripped him up. Before you know it, 2 or 3 brave lads from down the back of the plane had subdued him entirely with hands tied behind his back.
With the hijacker restrained, the suspected bomb was moved to the front of the plane.
Termination 128. 128 approach.
At 11:38 p.m., the pilot radioed air traffic control to inform them of the attempted hijacking.
We have a passenger claiming to have an explosive device trying to enter the cockpit. Has been overpowered by passengers. However, we'd like to land and have the device shut down. 128, understood.
The captain turned the plane sharply back to Melbourne Airport.
9 minutes later, at 11:47 p.m., the plane touched back down and was directed to a remote location.
We landed on the furthest runway away from the airport terminal as possible, and that gave us great comfort, but then we still had the threat of a bomb at the front of the plane.
Police were concerned there could be other terrorists on board. They kept their distance and made a tactical decision to stay out of the plane for 90 minutes. Eventually, at 1:21 a.m., Special Forces stormed the plane and located the suspected terrorist.
They were the Special Operations Group. They weren't just police. They were like heavily armed, like full SWAT team. So they were casing the plane, rifles drawn, semi-automatic weapons everywhere.
In the seat, everyone in the seats.
Put your heads down, please. Put your phones down. Put your heads down.
They came on to get this guy off, which didn't take more than a minute, 2 minutes at the most. They left. We felt much better. He was gone. The thing was still at the front. We needed to get off the plane, and we were pretty keen to get off the plane straight after that.
Every passenger on board was taken off the plane and held in a secure area for questioning, in case the man had an accomplice.
The selected federal agencies and police agencies worked out over the next 8 to 10 hours who'd seen anything, what they'd seen, and eventually we were allowed to go. So it was a fairly epic experience, emotionally exhausting.
An investigation revealed the hijacker's bomb was nothing more than a portable speaker. Police also discovered the 25-year-old had been released that day from a psychiatric hospital and had taken methamphetamine before boarding the plane. On the 8th of December 2017, Manoud Marks pleaded guilty to a charge of using threat of force to control an aircraft. In June 2018, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison.
Recently, there's been examples of terror attacks in public, and we're starting to see it across the world. So it's a reality of modern life, and this was a very real, very scary experience that I went through.
Over the past 20 years, there have been many attempts to storm the cockpit or blow up a plane. Some have been false alarms, but others have been serious threats to the safety of the aircraft. In 2001, 3 months after 9/11, a British terrorist tried to ignite explosives concealed in his shoes. In 2006, a plot to smuggle liquid bombs on board planes was uncovered. And 3 years later, a terrorist tried to detonate a bomb hidden in his underwear. Incidents like this have forced airport security to rapidly evolve. Today, every step is taken to try to keep up with the terrorist threat. But occasionally, someone manages to slip through. On the eastern coast of Africa lies Mogadishu, capital of Somalia, one of the world's poorest and most dangerous countries. Even flying in and out of the city's airport is high risk for any pilot brave enough to operate here.
There is nothing except the runway, and that's it. All these approaches are visual, no radar, no lights, no weather report, really nothing.
Passenger aircraft have even been used as target practice.
We used to land over the city. Sometimes they start shooting from the ground just for fun. Now we land from the seaside.
And some aspects of security at Mogadishu airport are almost non-existent.
In Europe or States, you can see who is who. They have the uniform, they have identity cards, everything. Over there, no uniforms, no ID cards, nothing.
On Tuesday, the 2nd of February 2016 at 10 a.m., Vladimir was busy preparing Dallo Airlines Flight 159 for a 2-hour journey north to Djibouti City. Shortly before the flight, Vladimir was told he would be taking another 70 passengers. Takeoff would have to wait until they arrived.
We were late 20 minutes because of this changing of the number of the passengers.
CCTV from inside the airport recorded travelers in the departure lounge. The camera captured one of Vladimir's late-running passengers. The runway at Mogadishu airport was full of people queuing to board. This meant Vladimir and his crew had to watch their passengers' every move.
You have to take your own security measures. Watching everyone, checking everyone, what they are doing, what they are putting in the aircraft.
At 11:30 a.m., all 74 passengers were on board. Vladimir's plane took off and climbed to 11,000 feet. Then there was a large blast from inside the plane.
It was a big explosion. It's blow up from the back. Everything was all sound, alarms, light alarms.
After the explosion, one passenger hit record on their phone. The blast had punctured a 4-foot hole in the side of the plane, ejecting one passenger out of the aircraft. Incredibly, Vladimir's plane hadn't been destroyed. But everyone on board was in danger if the hole ripped open any further. Vladimir ordered his flight attendant to get the passengers to safety.
I told him, okay, move the passengers back or forward. Just clear the area before and after the hole.
As dust from the blast blew around the aircraft, most passengers took shelter at the rear of the plane. Vladimir knew he had no time to lose. He had to land as quickly as possible.
I called the tower, I told them emergency return and asking to clear the area of the other aircraft.
At 11:53 a.m., Vladimir's plane landed back at Mogadishu airport.
And all these people, they are waiting, they are watching the aircraft like a miracle, I don't know. And that's the first time I realized that it was really serious. I don't know, I don't want to think about it.
In this era of terrorism, it's hard to fly without thinking the worst. And since 9/11, the greatest fear for some passengers is someone else taking control mid-flight and hijacking the plane. On the northern coast of Egypt lies the ancient city of Alexandria. In March 2016, opera singer Farah El-Debani had been enjoying a short break back home with her family.
Because of my job as an opera singer, I have to travel a lot. I have to give concerts, auditions, all over. But I always return for vacation to Egypt.
On the 29th of March at 5 a.m., Farah left her family and traveled to Alexandria's local airport.
The airport in Alexandria is a bit outside of the city, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Although I was excited to go back, there was something that felt a bit weird that day. I don't know why. I just felt like I was saying bye to my family, and I was not okay. I was really not happy that I'm leaving.
Airport CCTV from that morning showed enhanced security measures were in place, including shoes being X-rayed.
The security check was a bit different that day. They were doing a stricter security check. I was surprised, but in a good way. I said, okay, that's good. I mean, if they are reinforcing their security check, it's not a bad thing.
Once through security, Farah, along with 55 other passengers, was taking Egypt Air Flight 181 to the capital, Cairo. This short flight was scheduled to take 30 minutes and land at 6:52 a.m. At 6 a.m., Farah and the other passengers boarded the plane.
I had a seat in the very front of the plane, like the second row in economy class. It was not a very full flight, almost half full, and everything went well and everything seemed to be normal.
30 minutes later, Farah expected to be landing at Cairo airport. It was then she glanced out of the window.
When I looked out of my window and I saw that we are flying over the Mediterranean Sea, I didn't understand. Why are we doing that if we're just flying Cairo to Alex, which is only on land?
There had been no word from the cabin crew or the pilot about a change of route, but Farah wasn't unduly concerned.
I thought that probably there's a problem in landing in Cairo, and I didn't think about anything worse than that. Then one of the cabin crew started collecting the passports without giving a reason. So that was already a bit weird, because why would he do that? And I thought instantly probably they're looking for someone, a passenger, so they just need the passport to find this person.
After the passports were collected, there was still no sign of land, and still no information about the delay.
People were starting to ask the crew, why aren't we landing? Because it was already 40 minutes past our departure. Then one of the stewardess said that apparently we are hijacked. And we still don't know what he wants, but we're negotiating at the moment.
One passenger on the plane captured footage of the hijacker. He was holding a wire that led underneath his jacket.
I was in a shock, so I was like immediately having dark thoughts, like how it's gonna end. The first thing that came to my head was, there's a terrorist here and he's just gonna bomb this plane.
"29th of March 2016, 7 a.m. By now, Egypt Air Flight 181 should have landed at Cairo's international airport. Instead, it was over 100 miles off course, heading over the Mediterranean. The 56 passengers on board, including Farah El-Debani, had just been told their plane had been hijacked.
I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that there's a hijacker or there's a terrorist on the plane. People, they were in shock. And of course, people were asking the crew members, who is this? Why? What is he doing? What does he want? So I remember one of the cabin crew members telling us that we don't know what he wants, but apparently he has this explosive belt. And he showed it to one of the stewardess, telling her, if you don't do what I want, I will explode myself.
As the plane flew further over the Mediterranean, Farah wanted to see who had taken control of her plane.
One of the stewardess said that he's sitting in the back of the plane. So at that moment, I actually returned and checked him out. Yeah, that's him, the guy sitting in with the two crew members. I will never forget his face. I was a bit surprised because he looked like an older guy, like really normal. I was able to see that he had a belt around his waist with wires, like an explosive belt. The first thing I thought about was, how did he pass the security check? Like, how did this happen?
Farah was trapped 20,000 feet in the air with a hijacker. She was beginning to realize these could be her final moments.
I had a lot of thoughts of not talking to my family again. I felt like it's finished. I'm not gonna see them again. But I didn't really care about me leaving this life as much as leaving them, that they would have to live with this experience.
At 7:36 a.m., Farah's hijacked plane had been in the air for 60 minutes, twice as long as its scheduled flight.
At that moment, I started having one scenario after the other. Like, I thought, how are we gonna crash? Is he gonna bomb this plane, or are we gonna crash into the sea? Are we just gonna keep on flying until we're out of fuel?
Then the pilot made an announcement. They would soon be landing.
It was like the longest moment ever in my life, the moment before we landed. You can feel it's tense in the plane. It's like you can't wait for it to happen, but you're feeling every single moment of it.
Farah's plane touched down at 7:46 a.m. at Larnaca Airport in Cyprus.
And the minute we landed, I felt, okay, at least we are on land, and probably that's a good sign. But I was still thinking, okay, but we're still on the plane with him.
News crews arrived to film the hijacking. Farah's plane was kept away from the main airport terminal, and Cypriot police began negotiations with the hijacker.
We landed in a part of the airport that was abandoned, that was empty. There was no one and nothing.
After 90 minutes on the tarmac, the hijacker agreed to release 52 passengers, including Farah.
We all ran to the bus, and that was the moment where everyone started crying. There was a huge emotional outburst, and people were like hugging, and people were talking on the phone and texting. And that was the moment where I called my parents. I called them, and the minute I heard my parents' voice, I think that was the trigger that made me like just burst into tears. It was a very huge emotional moment.
At 10:57 a.m., the final hostages ran from the plane. The hijacker then followed them and surrendered. Questions were immediately raised in the aftermath of this incident. How had an explosive device been smuggled on board? CCTV from that morning showed the hijacker with his bags, passing through tougher security checks at Alexandria. But police quickly realized his bomb was not all that it seemed.
It later turned out that it was plastic casings in a piece of cloth, which was why it was able to get through security, because it posed no significant risk at the time.
The hijacker had managed to take control of an aircraft with a fake bomb made with mobile phone covers and wires. When arrested, the hijacker was identified as 59-year-old Egyptian Saif Eldin Mustafa. He claimed he'd taken control of the plane because of political prisoners held in Egypt. He currently remains in Cyprus, awaiting extradition back to Egypt to face trial. The hijacker's actions have had a lasting impact on Farah.
After this experience, I haven't found it really easy to fly. It's just the feeling that I get physically when I'm on a plane now. It's just this tension in my bones, in my joints, in my muscles, and subconsciously thinking that something bad might happen.
Every country has its own way of reacting to terrorist threats that occur within its airspace. Some divert planes to a specific airport equipped to handle a terror incident. But in the UK, when a terror threat is made mid-flight, there is a more immediate measure. 5th of August 2014. Flight QR-23 was nearing the end of its journey from Qatar's capital Doha to Manchester. Among the 269 passengers on board was sports scientist Josh Hartley.
It was my first trip to Australia, first time travelling alone without family. I always have to sit on the left-hand side next to the window. I just prefer it. It's like being in a car on like passenger seat. It was just like any other flight I've been on. People watching TV, listening to music, calm atmosphere, relaxed. You wouldn't have thought anything different really. Just a regular flight.
At 1:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the scheduled landing time, Josh saw something out of the window that prompted him to grab his phone and start filming. Just 100 meters from the plane's wingtip was an RAF fighter jet.
Everything goes through your head, like, why is it here? What's wrong? So my heart just dropped from that point. Even my heart drops now, just thinking about that moment and talking about it.
It's with the fighter jet there.
On the ground in Manchester, a member of the public caught the two planes flying overhead.
Weird.
All that came through my mind was worst case scenario. You got a fighter jet next to you, passenger plane, something serious, worst case scenario, we get shot down. That's what went through my head.
As the planes continued their journey, the passengers remained in the dark.
People started getting a bit more rowdy on the plane. People started talking a bit louder. They wanted to know what's going on and stuff, but try and get information on what's going on at that point, it was non-existent because staff had disappeared. Nothing from the cockpit of the tannoy.
What's going on there? Something's going on there.
Desperate for some information, Josh picked up his phone and looked on Twitter.
It seems that the people on the ground already knew before we did on the plane. My friend tweeted me a quote, and it was a news agency, and it said, Qatar Airways flight QR-23 has been escorted into Manchester Airport, possible bomb on board. My heart dropped, I just felt empty inside. I started shaking, everything was going through my head. How am I going to get off this plane? How am I going to survive? When I texted Mom, I went, there's a bomb on the plane. She thought I was messing around with her. And I said, there is a bomb on the plane. I'm not joking. I love you. Sorry. I was just sat in my chair, taking deep breaths, shaking, trying to calm myself down. It was 15 minutes it went on for. It's probably the longest 15 minutes it could ever be, yeah.
At 1:26 p.m, the plane finally landed at Manchester's airport. But the ordeal wasn't over.
Even though it was on the ground, I never felt safe in that situation because there's nothing I can do. I can't exit the plane, I can't run away from this situation.
10 minutes later, armed police boarded the plane. Cabin crew directed them to a passenger in a green t-shirt.
They just dragged him out of the seat and pinned him to the ground and took him off the plane.
The 47-year-old man was arrested and then sectioned under the Mental Health Act. It was revealed he had passed a note to crew claiming he had a bomb. But it was a hoax.
When we found out it was just a hoax, it leaves you empty inside, you are terrified, you are scared. I didn't know what to do in that situation. Putting all these families and everyone through so much stress and anxiety. I just don't know why he would do that, but at least at the end of the day, everyone's safe.
Today, passengers are on high alert when they step on board a plane. But their vigilance can sometimes lead to false alarms. On this flight from Bahrain to the UK, a passenger was restrained when some believed his actions could have been terror-related. It later turned out his aggressive behavior was just down to drink. Many passengers are willing to step in at the first sign of danger, in whatever form it takes. 27th of March, 2012. Early morning. Security specialist Anthony Antolino was heading to JFK Airport.
It was a normal day, you know. You get up early, kiss the wife goodbye, and get in a car, go to the airport. I was traveling to Vegas for a security conference. That flight was a packed flight full of other executives and folks going out to attend the conference.
JetBlue Flight 191 was scheduled to depart at 6:55 a.m. The 2,300-mile journey to Las Vegas would take 5 hours. Anthony and the other passengers boarded at 6:30 a.m., and everyone prepared for takeoff.
I got on the plane, I was in row 10 in the aisle. Got everything situated, started working, doing emails and what have you.
At 10:30 a.m., the plane had been in the air for just over 3 hours.
Everything was normal until I noticed the pilot came out of the cockpit in a very agitated, abrasive state. I was immediately anxious.
Anthony was so concerned, he began filming what he could see happening at the front of the plane.
The pilot was drinking a lot of water. Those small little airplane bottles, but he was putting them back pretty quickly. He kept wiping his mouth, like spittle or like, you know, stuff building up. You could tell he had an agitated state. His eyes were not really fixed and just normal, and you could see in the faces of the flight crew that they were uncomfortable. There was a lot of awkward looks back and forth between the crew. So I knew that something was not right. What I found peculiar was that when this flight attendant walks away from the beverage cart to attend to a passenger, the pilot reaches across the beverage cart as if to try and grab her and say, "Hey, where are you going? Come back here." That was a startling moment for me.
Anthony watched the pilot walk past him, and for a moment, he disappeared out of view.
The pilot finally went to the back of the plane, to the restroom. He came out of the restroom and proceeded to walk back towards the front of the aircraft. About midway, he started running, a full-on run, straight for the cockpit door. When he got to the cockpit door, he tried breaking into the cockpit. He tried kicking the door down, pounding on the door. I felt like the situation could absolutely turn really, really bad, really, really quick.
Fellow passenger, retired NYPD Sergeant Paul Babakitis, was shocked by the scene.
The worst case scenario running through my head is either the person that was banging on the cockpit door was the pilot or a terrorist.
The flight crew, there was 2 women and a guy. They were no match for this gentleman who was a very large guy. He's probably 6'4", fit. So I took it as the passengers may need to do something to resolve this escalating situation.
To fail to take any action could have dire consequences for everyone.
There was a gentleman, I just kind of tapped him on the shoulder and said, I think we have a problem. He jumped right up, didn't even ask a question, which was terrific.
As Anthony confronted the captain, other passengers saw something was wrong. Some began to film the confrontation.
Many thoughts were going through my head at that moment, one of which was, what's agitating him? What is he looking for? What is his objective?
We grabbed him and just pulled him away from the door, and we were just holding on to him. He was resisting and struggling a bit.
It was then the pilot started speaking to the passengers.
He looked at me, but as he looked at me, he looked through me. And then he started rambling about Iraq and Iran and talking about military actions and things like that.
He was yelling, they got us in Iraq, they got us in Iran, some mentions of a bomb being on board.
Everyone could see the situation escalating.
And he told me, we're not going to Sin City, and that we have 130 souls aboard the plane. At that point, I realized we're all in trouble.
27th of March, 2012, 10:40 a.m. JetBlue Flight 191 was 3 hours into a 5-hour flight to Las Vegas when its captain started behaving erratically. Security specialist Anthony Antolino was one of a few passengers who had gone to confront the pilot.
He said, it's time to recite the Lord's Prayer. I think that's when the 3 of us that were holding on to him really just kind of locked eyes and looked at each other. And without saying a word, we just literally put him to the ground. We pulled his legs out, put his face to the ground, and then we all stayed right on top of him. Somebody was holding his head, I had his feet, somebody else was holding his arms, and he was resisting, trying to get up, and he's a pretty big guy. So it was a struggle.
Helping Anthony hold down the pilot was retired Police Sergeant Paul Babakitis.
We were able to pin the pilot on the belly of the plane, and restraining him was a very difficult task. Because although he seemed docile while he was being restrained, at any second he could become violent. And you have to be prepared for those acts of violence.
As passengers restrained the pilot,
Amarillo, JetBlue 191, emergency.
the co-pilot declared an emergency.
JetBlue 191, roger for now. Just turn 5 degrees to the left, and if you need something different, let me know.
JetBlue 191, emergency, and we're going to need authorities and medical to meet us at the airplane.
Yes, sir, they're standing by for you.
Once we had him on the ground, the crew notified the first officer, and we started a very, very rapid and steep descent. They notified us that they were diverting the aircraft to Amarillo, Texas.
It was announced to the cabin the plane would be on the ground in 20 minutes. Anthony, Paul, and the other passengers would have to restrain the pilot until then.
That 20 minutes seemed like an eternity. We just knew we had to keep pressure on this person.
We decided to just stay put and stay on top of him. He tried to get up and struggle a few times, but we just held him on the ground. There really was not much talking. It's interesting in those moments where there's such a heightened sense of danger and adrenaline. There was not much talk at all.
The plane touched down at 11:15 a.m. Waiting outside and ready to board were the emergency services.
The door opened, and I saw a uniformed police officer enter the plane.
With the incident under control, many people began filming.
Please, everybody, please, we don't need pictures of this, please. Everybody just...
A lot of officials came on board. They handcuffed him. We stepped out of the way. They had control of him at that point, and then they took him off the aircraft.
Once he was off the plane, I felt greatly relieved that the threat had been diffused. No one was injured, including the pilot. This was a good ending.
In the aftermath of this event, the actions of the co-pilot were seen as averting a potential disaster. When the captain had left the cockpit in a distressed state, the co-pilot had locked the cockpit door and refused to let the pilot back in.
I feel a lifetime debt of gratitude to the first officer for being able to stay composed, stay calm, and be able to coerce the pilot out of the cockpit so that he could take control and stabilize the cockpit so that we would get somewhere safely.
The FBI took the plane's cockpit voice recorder to investigate whether terrorism or another factor played a part in this incident. The pilot was charged with interfering with a flight crew, but found not guilty due to insanity. The pilot later claimed JetBlue had been negligent and sued for $14.9 million. He said he had been suffering from a brain seizure, which should have been spotted. The case has yet to come to trial. Next time on World's Worst Flights, panic as fire takes hold of a downed airliner.
I just want to get out of there.
A miraculous landing leaves passengers fighting for survival. And a family trip comes to a shocking end.
I thought, this could be it.